Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtota Siddha Sri Srimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnu. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 25. Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyakshaha Avastitaha Guham Veda Hi Apratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam. Please repeat. Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Guham Vedabhya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Vacha Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmo Vacha Bhagavan Sarvabhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vedahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam. Mataji's. Bhagavan Sarva Bhutanam Adyakshavasito Guham Chikirshitam Brahma Uvacha Bhagavan Sarva Bhutanam Adyakshavasito Guham Vidahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahmovacha Bhagavan Sarva Bhutanam Adyaksho Vastito Guham Vidahya Pratirudhena Prajnanena Chikirshitam Brahma Uvacha Lord Brahma said, Bhagavan, O my Lord, Sarva Bhutanam, of all living entities, Adyakshaha, director, Avastitaha, situated, Guham, within the heart, Veda, no, he, certainly, Apratirudhena, without hindrance, Prajnanena, by superintelligence, Chikirshitam, endeavors. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Brahma said, O Personality of Godhead, you are situated in every living entity's heart as the Supreme Director, and therefore you are aware of all endeavors by your superior intelligence, without any hindrance whatsoever. Purport. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that the Lord is situated in everyone's heart as the witness, and as such, He is the Supreme Director of sanction. The Director is not the enjoyer of the fruits of action, for without the Lord's sanction, no one can enjoy. For example, in a prohibited area, a habituated drunkard puts forward his application to the director of drinking, and the director, considering his case, sanctions only a certain amount of liquor for drinking. Similarly, the whole material world is full of many drunkards, in the sense that each and every one of the living entities has something in his mind to enjoy, and everyone desires the fulfillment of his desires very strongly. The Almighty Lord, being very kind to the living entity as the Father is kind to the Son, fulfills the living entity's desire for his childish satisfaction. With such desires in mind, the living entity does not actually enjoy, but he serves the bodily whims unnecessarily without profit. The drunkard does not derive any profit out of drinking, but because he has become a servant of the drinking habit and does not wish to get out of it, the merciful Lord gives him all facilities to fulfill such desires. The impersonalists recommend that one should become desireless, and others recommend banishing desires altogether. That is impossible. No one can banish desires altogether because desiring is the living symptom. Without having desires, a living entity would be dead, which he is not. Therefore, living conditions and desire go together. Perfection of desires may be achieved when one desires to serve the Lord, and the Lord also desires that every living entity banish all personal desires and cooperate with his desires. That is the last instruction of the Bhagavad Gita. Brahmaji agreed to this proposal, and therefore he is given the responsible post of creating generations in the vacant universe. Oneness with the Lord therefore consists of dovetailing one's desires with the desires of the Supreme Lord. That makes for the perfection of all desires. The Lord, as the supersoul in the heart of every living being, knows what is in the mind of each living entity, and no one can do anything without the knowledge of the Lord within. By his superior intelligence, the Lord gives everyone the chance to fulfill his desires to the fullest extent, and the resultant reaction is also awarded by the Lord. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadam Mahyam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripasadubhi Evacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivikasa Swaminita Namine. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminita Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vagisha Yasya Vadane Lakshmi Yasya Chavaksasi Yasyaste Hridaye Samvit Tamnasimha Mahamajay. Lord Brahma said, O personality of Godhead, you are situated in every living entity's heart as the supreme director, and therefore you are aware of all endeavors by your superior intelligence, without any hindrance whatsoever. So, we're getting towards the end of this chapter, and now Brahma is describing the Paramatma aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he's situated within every living entity's heart as the Supreme Director. And there's this analogy that's used commonly of two birds in a tree, and it's very fitting that the living entity is one of the birds and it is enjoying the fruits of the tree, whereas the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is there in the tree as well, observing everything and not partaking in enjoying those fruits, simply observing and taking note of everything that's happening, ultimately waiting for the living entity that's enjoying those fruits to cease from doing that and turn towards him and find the true fulfillment and happiness that they're longing for. So Krishna is situated as the Paramatma, and he's the best friend of all living entities because he's traveling with us throughout all of our countless births and in whatever abominable species of life we may be in. He's there with us when we're worms in stool, and he's there with us when we're pigs eating stool. So, he's situated as the best friend of living entity because we can easily say that no other friends that we may have would do such a thing, would be with us in such a situation. And he's so merciful because the whole time he's just simply fulfilling whatever desires we do have, whatever twisted material desires we have, and just patiently waiting for us to turn to him. He's ready to fulfill our desires at every moment. And this is why, ultimately, we need to be extremely cautious and careful about what kind of desires we are cultivating in our heart. Ultimately, we're in this material world because we cultivated the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, and it has led to countless births of suffering that we can't even imagine how far it goes back. It's said that it's since time immemorial. It can't be traced back to when the jiva fell from the spiritual world, but we can be assured that we've gone through all kinds of suffering that we could possibly imagine and more. So, because of this, this lust, this desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, this is the cause of the material world, and this is why this material world has been created ultimately, is for us to fulfill these twisted desires. It says in the Bhagavad Gita that, Prabhupada mentions at the beginning of the purport that the Bhagavad Gita, I'll just go back one sec. The Bhagavad Gita confirms the Lord is situated in everyone's heart, and I just pulled that up. At least one reference to it is 1323. Upadrashta tunat macha bharta bhokta maheshvaraha paramat meti chapyukto dehesmin purusha paraha. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. So, again, that's just a reference in the Bhagavad Gita that kind of explains the super soul. But back to this lust that I was discussing. So, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, text 37, Sri Bhagavanu Vacha, Kama Esha Krodha Esha, Rajoguna Samudbhabaha, Mahashano Mahapapma Vidye Nam Ihavar Vairinam. Translation is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with this material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world." And this is right after Arjuna asks, "O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force?" So this lust, which is within our hearts in the material world and is the reason we're here, is impelling us outside of our control, outside of our will, to engage in all kinds of sinful acts. And Krishna describes it pretty heavily. He says it's the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And it works very closely with the mind. The mind is also described as the greatest enemy of the living entity elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. So these two things work very closely together. The mind cultivates desires, and they sit within the heart, and it's contemplated, and then it turns into action, and then these anarthas are born, and some scars are created, and you kind of continue on this path, this downward trajectory. So there's also the very famous one that Prabhu always says, that there's no love in this material world. Love is for Krishna. And there's the Atmendriya Prativancha Tare Balekama, Krishnendriya Prati Iche Tare Premanama. That, the desire to gratify one's own senses, Atmendriya, is lust, kama. And the desire to fulfill the senses of Krishna, Krishnendriya, is prema, love. So ultimately, this is the platform we have to reach, is realize that all of this desire for sense gratification, chasing after gratifying these temporary material senses, is only lust. It's not actually love that we think it is oftentimes. And come to the platform of trying to satisfy Krishna's senses, which we'll get to a little bit later. There's also this very nice section of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 60 to 63, I believe. I'm just going to read the translation real quick. Yeah, you can pull it up. So yeah, just to save time, I'll just go through the translation. So, the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. From anger complete delusion arises, and from delusion bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So we can see that Krishna is describing that one who restrains these senses and keeps them under control is someone of steady intelligence. But if they are undergoing this process and simultaneously contemplating the objects of the senses, maybe they're outwardly restraining their senses, but inwardly they're contemplating and cultivating lust and material desires. From that point, there's an attachment that arises within the heart. And from this, you get lust, and then from lust, anger, when that lust isn't fulfilled. From anger, delusion, bewilderment of memory. Bewilderment of memory, intelligence is lost, and then intelligence is lost, you fall down in the material pool. So even someone who is on the transcendental platform, or not fully on the transcendental platform, not a completely pure devotee, but endeavoring to become a pure devotee, they're restraining their senses. But if they are engaged in this insincere, I guess you could say, practice of outwardly seeming renounced and not engaging in sinful activities, but inwardly they are rampantly cultivating these desires, their future and their fate is described right here, that they fall down again into the material pool. It's a very scary place to be, and it's also described in other places as a blind well, that if you lose the association of devotees and lose your devotional service, you become like someone that's fallen into a blind well. There's no one there to come save you and find you. You're completely lost. So Prabhupada also explains in this purport this analogy of a drunkard, which this was actually, I've read through the Bhagavatam before this part, but this part didn't really stick out to me, so it kind of struck me when I read this, that the whole material world is full of many drunkards, in the sense that each and every one of them, every one of the living entities has something in his mind to enjoy, and everyone desires the fulfillment of his desires very strongly, and that the Lord is very kind to the living entity, and he fulfills the living entity's desires for his childish satisfaction. With such desires in mind, the living entity does not actually enjoy, but he serves the bodily whims unnecessarily. The drunkard does not derive any profit out of drinking, but because he has become a servant of the drinking habit and does not wish to get out of it, the merciful Lord gives him all facilities to fulfill such desires. So it's talking about this idea of there's a drunkard putting forward his application to the director of drinking, and the director considers his case and sanctions a certain amount of liquor. So he doesn't give him unlimited, but he gives him a little bit to enjoy. And similarly, Krishna gives us, in the material world, when we have these material desires, he gives us a sanction to enjoy them in some way, according to our karma and what we deserve through the karma. So there's this analogy my Guru Maharaj likes to use of the politician that is running for office, maybe to be prime minister or something, and they don't win, but they keep that desire within their heart, but they're so sinful that they don't have any, pious credit to actually get that position, but they'll, in the next life, they will get something like that. They might be the leader of a pack of dogs or something like that. So Krishna fulfills the desire in a way that aligns with that living entity's karma and what they deserve, and also fulfilling what they want. So it's a very amazing design. And similarly, this analogy of the drunkard I found really interesting, because the drunkard is drinking, and they're not, everybody knows, and even the drunkard knows, that it's not good for them. That's not what they should be doing. But they're not willing to give up that desire. It says here, the drunkard does not derive any profit out of drinking, but he's become a servant of the habit and does not wish to get out of it. So similarly, so many of us, we're in this material world, and we know that we're suffering. We know, we might even have studied a little bit of the Shastra and understood that, okay, like this is why I'm suffering. We see this so often with the Bhakti program, that we're meeting someone and they're reading the books, they understand the philosophy to the, at least a basic level. They're probably chanting, following 4 regs and things like that. But so easily they fall back, mainly due to not having association of devotees. But it's because they've become a servant of these habits. And ultimately, somewhere within their heart, they don't actually wish to get out of this material entanglement. Even though they know, again, through their intelligence, they can understand that they are simply a servant of their senses. It's not actually their real desire to go chase after these material things. Still, they chase after them out of habit, out of these anarthas again, and out of not actually wanting to get out of it, and they're completely dragged around like this. I'll show this later, but this the image of the horses dragging around the carriage of the horses of the senses. Senses are compared to horses, and they're dragging around the living entity hither and thither. Let me see what else I had. So Krishna also gives us this feeling that we have some sort of happiness when we get these material desires fulfilled. But again, it's designed in such a fantastic way when you really think about it, that there's this sense of fulfillment and happiness that the materialist gets when they fulfill their material desires, but ultimately there's also that frustration that always is lingering, because you're never fully satisfied. No matter how many times we satisfy our material desires, we're never going to get that full satiation, full happiness, and it eventually fades. That temporary happiness we get eventually fades away, and we're left chasing another material desire. So for the intelligent person, it's meant to, this process is meant to ultimately bring us to the point of surrender, and the point of becoming so disenchanted with material life and chasing after these desires that we begin searching for something else. And that's when, someone is ripe to read Prabhupada's books and associate with devotees, and someone can take up the process very easily. We see with people that join, they don't come from any background of worshiping Krishna or even knowing who Krishna is. They've never met devotees, they've never read the Bhagavad Gita, but they come and we meet them on college campus or online or something like that, and we send them some books, we send them, let them read some of Prabhupada's books, we teach them some of the philosophy, we engage them in devotional service, let them join the kirtans, taste prasadam, wear dhoti and tilak, let them experience what it's like to live as a devotee, and they begin developing a taste for that. And this process is extremely powerful. So ultimately, when you get to this point of frustration and you surrender, you're taking the first step to getting out of this entanglement, and you've become sincere in that you're no longer like the drunkard that is not wishing to get out of it. You've flipped, and you actually want to get out of this entanglement. And like I was saying before, there's no fulfillment in chasing any of these desires. You become a slave to your senses, and it never actually satiates you. There's also this. Can I just pull this up real quick? I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to show two pictures. When we were in LA for Janmashtami 2022, there was this. We got the chance to go into the Bhagavad Gita museum there, and it was really amazing. There's only a few of us that were there, and it was like a private tour almost. But there's these dioramas, I guess you could call them, they're like little exhibits, and so there was like 3D versions of a lot of these paintings, like the horses were there, this was there, and this was actually my favorite. But I got some of this original BBT artwork on my computer, and I found this to pull it up to just kind of illustrate some things. So this is a really nice one, because this is kind of the crossroads up here. You're at this point where you can choose one of the two. You can choose, going towards lust or going towards the spiritual master. See, it says right here, accepting spiritual master. So you can accept the spiritual master and surrender to him, or you can have attachment and go down. So this human life is at this crossroads, and this is a really great illustration of that. So obviously you see the attachment, he starts going down, he follows the woman, and then these goblin-looking people grab him and chain him up. Yeah, exactly. They're labeled. So there's anger and greed, and then there's lust over there. They bind the living entity and drag them down into, as you can ultimately see, ignorance, envy, and ultimately falls into this ocean of animal birth, is what you see down there. This ocean of material existence. And you see, this is really, I didn't even see this before, but you see there's Maya Devi. It looks like this illusion of material enjoyment that you're chasing, and he's chasing. He's still looking. You see, look how greedy he looks. He looks like he's like completely after that. And then yeah. So let's look at the other guy. So he's surrendering to the spiritual master here. He's looking upwards. He's no longer looking down, and the spiritual master shows him the way. And you see study of the Vedas right here. And we see sin's control. And he goes all the way up, back to spiritual knowledge, back to Krishna. So this is the turning point, the crossroads that we're at, is we can choose one or the other. Okay, you can go back to, actually wait, and then this, I'm sure we've all seen this, but I just like to show this as well, is that these senses are dragging us hither and thither, out of control. Huh? No, I don't have it, yeah. Someone could find it maybe and pull it up, but yeah, it's a really amazing. If you ever go to LA and you've never seen that, you should go check it out. But the way to, as you saw in this previous photo, the sense control was one of the steps to get up to the spiritual world. So we have to bring these horses under control, ultimately. And the way we do that is through devotional service. What is this? Savai mana Krishna padar vindayor bachamsi vaikunta gunanar varnare karo harir mandir marjanari shutim chakar katore makunda lingalia darshane jaso tadbitya katra sparshenga sangamam granam chatat pada saroja sarupe shrimat tulasya rasanam tarapite paro harir kshetra padanu sarpane shiro hrishikesha pada bivandane kamam chatasye natu kama kam yaya Yatotamashloka janashrayaratihi. This Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna, his words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord, and he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambarish never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service and various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. Okay, I'll show that real quick. So yeah, it's a really nice diagram, and there's all these, you go through a nice dark hallway, and each one of these is individually lit up, and then there's a narration telling what it is. It's really great, even for someone that doesn't know anything about Bhagavad Gita or anything about Krishna consciousness, to go and get a basic understanding of what the philosophy is. So we really, we're lucky to get a private tour of that. Okay, yeah, so as just stating, these are the ways that we can engage these senses in Krishna's service in order to actually become free from this material entanglement. Everything we do outside of Krishna consciousness with our senses is only entangling us further in the material world and leading to more suffering, more births and deaths, repeated birth and death. Whereas everything we do that's described here, everything we do in devotional service, is leading us up those stairs, back to the path, towards Godhead, and ultimately we want to go and we want to bring other people as well. So that's why we preach and distribute books and things like that. But this is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. So you see, he's not, again, Prabhupada, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but he's describing that this becoming desireless is not a possibility. This is a speculation that so many people get into because they see that desire is the cause of the problem. Okay, material desire, but they just think desire is the cause of their suffering, and that by not fulfilling the desires, they're ultimately frustrated and it leads them to misery. So they decide, well, I'll get rid of these desires. But Prabhupada's describing here in the purport that desire is the symptom of the living entity. Without desire, the living entity would not be alive, and that's not the case. So ultimately, we have to dovetail our own desires and give them up in a way. We have to kind of give up our material desires and take up spiritual desires. But it starts by taking up the desire of the spiritual master and desire of Krishna, and not speculating on our own material desires and trying to create some kind of mental speculation of what a spiritual desire is. So I had one more thing to cover. Let's see. We may be able to achieve this like desireless state just for a short period of time. Like I used to do all this like silent meditation and stuff, and you can kind of get into a state that's like sleep, but you're kind of like somewhat aware. And there's no prominent material desires there. At least they don't seem to be there. And it seems to be like, okay, like finally some relief, right? It's like you can finally breathe. It's like you're drowning your whole life and then you get some air. But ultimately, you can't do that forever, because you have to engage the mind and the senses again in something else at some point. You can't just sit there like a stone forever. And even if you achieve this impersonal Brahman realization where there's apparently no desires, you merge into the absolute, ultimately, even in that situation, you have to come back to the material world, because, again, as Prabhupada is saying, the symptom of the living entity is desire. So even if you can suppress that for billions of years or something, ultimately, it will always arise again at some point. It's just the nature of the living entity to have desires. And then at that point, you're not going to go up, you're going to come back down and achieve more repeated birth and death. And it's a big detour on your spiritual path to actually transcend birth and death. It's a complete waste of time. So again, if we're practicing Krishna consciousness, our desires have to become spiritual. They have to transform from material desires into spiritual desires. We have to get rid of these material desires and replace them with spiritual desires. But if we're doing this and we're replacing our material desires with spiritual desires, how is it that sometimes you see someone that's on the devotional path, how do they fall down and stop practicing? And I was listening to my Guru Maharaj speak about this yesterday, and he said that what happens in that case is that the devotee's desires change. So this is something we should be very mindful of, very cautious of, is that if our desires are changing from spiritual desires to material desires, even if it's a very slow process, again, it's, as we spoke in the beginning, it begins with this contemplation. And from this contemplation, lust arises. So if we're cultivating these within our heart, this is how ultimately we can fall away from devotional service, is our desires are changing. But it's also said that no matter where you are in terms of desire, whether you're full of desires or free from desire, the best course of action is to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is Bhagavatam 2.3.10. Akama sarvakamo va mokshakama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the Personality of Godhead. So, no matter where we are, and Prabhu was talking about this yesterday, that no matter what we have within our heart, whether it's a bunch of material desires, or it's, we want to be a pure devotee and we're very sincere in that, or we're taking up devotional service just to fulfill our material desires, that's actually the most intelligent thing to do, rather than trying to just be a straight up materialist in this world and go around completely gratifying your senses, acting like an animal, doing anything that your mind tells you to do. Why is that? Because even in this world that we're in currently, the ability to enjoy is not so prominent. There's this analogy that I really like, when I first heard it, that how much pleasure can you get in your pinky? And, it's like, okay, you can maybe like massage it or something like that. Or like if there's an itch on it, you can scratch it and it feels good. But how much pain you can get there, was it Chinese torture? Yeah, some kind of Chinese torture method. There's so many torture methods, but there's some Chinese torture method where they do something to the pinky and it's like extremely painful, agonizing, and, very effective method of torture. There's a whole science, a whole swath of people that their entire profession is figuring out how to torture people. They banned torture in the UN or whatever, and then Americans invented waterboarding, which doesn't fall under torture. So there's always people trying to figure out how to torture people. And so these bodies they're full of misery, and they're able to experience so much more suffering than they are pleasure. So an intelligent person, that even if they're full of material desires, like it's saying in this verse, they ultimately, if they're intelligent, they can see that, okay, well, if I perform devotional service, even though it's mixed, and I perform it wholeheartedly, I can go to the heavenly planets and enjoy so much more than here. So might as well just join the Krishna consciousness movement and do that. And then in my next life, I'll really get to enjoy for a very long period of time. So this is ultimately, we can even speak this to people and try to convince them in that way. But ultimately, it's best to come to the platform of true devotional service, getting rid of these material desires, cleansing our heart of these material desires by chanting the holy names. That's how it happens. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. So ultimately, we want to come to that point, and we want to convince others to do that as well. And the ultimate perfection of our desire is to finally dovetail it with the desire of the Lord. And so how do we do that? That seems like if you're just telling someone on the street, you have to get rid of all your desires and replace them with the desires of God. It's like, okay, well, what do I do? How do I do that? It's a pretty confusing statement if you've never heard of anything like that. Well, for us, it's very simple. We sing this every morning. Sakshadare Dvina Samasta Shastra, Uktastata Bhava Yate Visadbida. The spiritual master is the representative of the Lord, and he's non-different from the Lord. And that, Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada, Yasya Prasada Nakati Katopi, that by attaining the mercy of the spiritual master, we can attain the mercy of the Lord. So ultimately, these verses are teaching us to surrender our desires to the desires of the spiritual master. Replace our own personal desires with the desires of the spiritual master. And ultimately, that's how we can find this perfection of desire, and we can perfect our lives in this way. Because it's not that the spiritual master is just a ordinary person that has their own desires, and okay, well, if, I'll just replace my mundane desires with their mundane desires. No, it's that they don't have any desires of their own. They've reached the stage of perfection where all of their desires are Krishna's desires. They're not their own personal desires. And, we learn through the parampara that this book distribution is the desire of the acharyas, all the way back. Lord Chaitanya started this, right? And he instructed Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami to write books. And they wrote books, and then, there was this, we read this all the time. We read at the beginning of the marathon that Narottam Das Thakur, that they would go distribute books. And, they wrote that, what is the use of doing all these things if our book scores are so low? So there's this desire within the hearts of our acharyas that we distribute books widely and profusely and with enthusiasm. And we continue on increasing it, as Srila Prabhupada said. So this is a direct desire coming down from the Lord himself, Lord Chaitanya. He started this, and we can see that by doing this book distribution, we're directly pleasing Krishna himself and all the acharyas as well. So again, it's not that we replace our material desires with our own spiritual desires, or what we perceive to be our own spiritual desires. We're running into this kind of thing a lot when you try to, when you're in the Bhakta program and you're speaking to people that have their own preconceived ideas about spiritual life, and they might have studied Buddhism or this or that, a lot of Mayavadis and stuff like that. So they have this idea that, of course, it's mental speculation is what it comes down to, that they can mentally speculate and figure out whatever sounds best to them, whatever resonates with them the most. And they say things like, this is what my current understanding is, and this is, what I've come to believe over the past few months, or whatever. They read something, and then they take what they like from that, and they change their kind of spiritual worldview based on what they just learned, and then they discard whatever they don't want. And they just kind of continue on in this way, creating this hodgepodge of spiritual ideas that doesn't make any sense ultimately. It's all nonsense, even, in terms of like, there are like bona fide Mayavadis, right, that ultimately they want to merge into the impersonal Brahman, and that's a real process that can happen, but they just create their whole entire mental speculation of what spirituality is, and they mix up Buddhism and this, Mayavad and just New Age spirituality, all kinds of things, and just mental speculation to the max. So ultimately they speak of as if they're so intelligent, or that they think that they're on a higher platform than just like a karmi that's not thinking about these things. But ultimately they're, in complete delusion, because they're just cultivating a different flavor of material desire within their heart, and just kind of mentally just enjoying that process of speculation. It's not that we, again, replace these material desires with our own desires, because there's this, we've said this before, that in the Bible it says, what, thy will be done, right? That, yeah. Thy will be done, not mine. Yeah, thy will be done, not mine. So the higher platform than that is not that I have a will and you have a will, Lord, and let your will be done, not mine, because mine's different than yours. It's the highest platform is coming to the stage like the spiritual master is at, that their will is God's will. They don't have any will of their own. So, we replace our own desires with the desires of the pure devotees. We become their unalloyed servant instead of the servant of our own mind. And that's how we conquer this enemy of lust that we've been discussing. There's this verse, Brachavyamenam tadadabhya viryam upekshaya jetitam apramataha guror harishcharano pasanastro jahi vyalikam svayam atmamosham. It's one of my favorite verses, that this uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. And if one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will become victorious. It will surely become victorious, I think it says. And that Guror Harish Charano Pashanastro Jahi Vyalikam Swayam Amosham, that one should conquer this mind with the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master, Guror and Krishna, Guror Harish Charano Pashanastro. So we have this amazing facility, this amazing weapon. We have this like Brahmastra, that we can use against the mind, against these lusty desires, and it's completely available to us. It just takes sincerity and pulling away from this what the drunkard is going through, that they do not wish to get out of it. We have to wish to get out of it. That's what it comes down to. Ultimately, deep within our heart, we have to come to the conclusion that I don't want to be in this material world anymore. I don't want to cultivate these material desires. And then it's not through our own power that these material desires begin to be eradicated within our heart. It's through the mercy of the Lord and the spiritual master. So, by coming to that sincere platform, we get the mercy and we please Krishna and we please our guru, and these material desires begin to wither away. These weeds that are choking up the creeper of devotion can be plucked out. As they were speaking last night about these book distributors, that there might be a book distributor that's not following properly, but they're doing more books and all that. But it doesn't matter, because if you're following properly and you're distributing books, you're actually pleasing Krishna and the spiritual master, whereas they are not. So you're the one getting the mercy, with this sincere endeavor. That's what really counts, and following correctly, sincerely endeavoring, and putting your faith in Krishna and the Guru, that, I may not be distributing so many books, but I'm surrendered to you. Please help me distribute more books. I really have this desire to distribute more books. You cultivate that desire within your heart, and the mercy will flow, and things will turn around for you in that way. Another thing I was thinking about in this verse is that this, while we're cultivating all these material desires, and they're, they might seem really big, right? Like, okay, I want to have $1 billion, or I want to, start a really successful company, or have an amazing family, or whatever it is, travel the world, buy this really nice car. It seems like very big to us, because we're in our own bubble. But you take even the biggest material desire, I guess the biggest material desire is to become one with God, or to become God, become Krishna. But I'm just thinking in terms of like the straight up materialist, in this world, like who would, like, I was thinking like Elon Musk, like he has these desires, like go to Mars, and like, replace all the cars with electric cars, and do all these crazy things he wants to like implant your brain with some like microchip or something. So he has all these like huge like materialist desires, so seemingly huge, right? But when you look at it in comparison to the desires of Krishna and the desires of the spiritual master, it seems like completely insignificant. Like he wants to go like with a rocket to another planet, like, okay, like you want to go travel a little bit in the universe. But Krishna wants to liberate all the living entities in the whole universe. And not in this universe, all existence, all of the material creation. It's unlimited universes, unlimited living entities. We can't even fathom having close to such a big desire as Krishna has. And he wants it so bad. He loves us so much. He's really trying to, and like endeavoring to bring us back, way harder than we are trying to turn to him. He's trying to get us to turn to him, and trying to create a condition where we go back to him. The analogy of the king and his the son that leaves the kingdom and forgets that he's the son of the king. All he has to do is turn back and go back to the king, and the king will accept him. And the king is just waiting, for the son to come back and re-accept him. So Krishna's desire is so much bigger. And so by devoting our lives to these desires of Krishna and the desires of the pure devotee, we'll have, not only within this life, but we'll have unlimited lifetimes that we can work on fulfilling these desires. It might take Elon Musk like his whole life to achieve that desire to go to Mars, but we could spend the next 10 billion lifetimes trying to fulfill Krishna's desire to help bring the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. We can go distribute books everywhere. There's this, was it Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that said you can preach to the plants? Yeah. So it's like there's unlimited scope for this preaching work, and it can continue to expand infinitely. We think we're, at least I get thinking, wow, like, all these devotees are, distributing so many books, and they're distributing so many books, but we can keep going. We can expand it infinitely. We could get every single human being on this planet a Bhagavatam set and a Chaitanya Charitamrita set and all of Prabhupada's books. And then we can go on to the animals and the plants. And, again, I think I said it in the class before, maybe I said in a comment, that every day there's 10,000 people just in America are born. There's like probably 10,000 people are turning like 18 or like 20 or getting their first job. So there's like 10, every day we could be selling 10,000 Bhagavatams, like no problem. So there's always going to be an influx of more and more spirit souls coming into the material world, falling down from the spiritual world and needing spiritual knowledge, needing Krishna consciousness, needing Prabhupada's books. So it can kind of expand on infinitely. And ultimately, the way we find strength in this, because it's fulfilling this huge desire is something that seems overwhelming maybe if you're just on your own. But ultimately it comes down to associating with the devotees is the most important step, is that we can, what is this? I've pulled this up. Chandanacharya Prabhu quoted it yesterday, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastre Koi, Lava Macha Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. The verdict of all revealed scriptures is that by even a moment's association with a pure devotee, one can attain all success. So we have to associate with devotees and stay in that association and cultivate that desire together and continue to encourage each other to abandon material desires and take up the desires of the spiritual master and the desires of Krishna. And that's how we'll find ultimate success and happiness and perfection in our life. Prabhupada goes on to kind of in this purport talking about that the Lord is the super soul in the heart of every living being, knows what is in the mind of each living entity, and no one can do anything without the knowledge of the Lord within. By his superior intelligence, the Lord gives everyone the chance to fulfill his desires to the fullest extent, and the resultant reaction is also awarded by the Lord. So Krishna knows even better than we do what's in our heart, what's in our mind, and what we're really wanting in life. So by sincerely cultivating spiritual desire and the desire to serve the devotees, serve our spiritual master, serve Krishna, Krishna will undoubtedly shower his mercy upon us and give us the opportunity to fulfill those desires. I'm sure everybody can attest to the fact that Krishna fulfills all of our desires. They've experienced that in devotional service, that they had some kind of desire. Like I know one story is that Mahotsa Prabhu, not this last time he broke the record, but before, or maybe it was like the first time or something, that you said that you woke up that day and you're like, I'm going to beat the record today, like definitely, like, and you just had that strong desire, and then you went on and Krishna made it happen. So I know there's so many examples for myself as well that I've wanted to do this thing or that thing, and somehow it happens in a very magical way, you could say. Like, just for one anecdote is that when I started this marathon, I got to go be Mahotsa Prabhu's charioteer, his assistant, and I was just carrying Bhagavatams for him and just doing some small service. But it was extremely blissful. I was like just really inspired seeing someone of his caliber distributing books, and I was kind of like blown away when I would see like him just do like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 of them in like 30 minutes, like just boom, boom, boom. Everybody that came out would take a Bhagavatam, and you could see like he's really empowered, and it's just there's a potency to it, and it's very infectious. So I was really excited. We were having a good time traveling around. We were like really blissed out, and then I had to come back and work on this other service, these videos. So this was a desire I had been cultivating for a long time. And I think Vishnu Chitta Prabhu mentioned that I even mentioned that to my spiritual master back over a year ago now, that I had this desire. And all this time I was like kind of just patiently waiting and trying, just praying for that to happen. And then it happened right at the moment where, not that I didn't want it, but like the most inconvenient moment, you could say, or like the most like, I was like so like, I was like, this is the best service I've ever done, assisting Mahotsa Prabhu, like, this is like the perfection of life, like just do this, keep doing this, and then like boom, I got taken away from that service. So, it's interesting how Krishna will kind of, again, what is it you say, that Krishna has like the best swag or something like that? Like, he's like a very poetic too, he creates like nice drama and everything. He just like, he's amazing, He can really pull your heartstrings and just like make you think that you want something, and then like make you think you don't want it, when you get it. Ultimately, I've heard Vishnu Chitta Prabhu say this a long time ago, that we should ultimately come to the platform of not regretting, but just wishing that the only desire we have is to develop love for Krishna, and actually, just do whatever that, the spiritual master asks of us, and just be completely surrendered. And that should be our, we should we feel kind of regretful that we're asking other things of Krishna. I want this specific service, or I want like in this way, I want this kind of prasadam today, whatever. We should be kind of sincere in that we want to just do whatever it is that we're asked, and that's the platform of pure devotional service. That's how we get to that platform. So I'll end my class there. If there are any comments, questions, or corrections, please let me know. I think the mic's over there still. So. Mm. 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 What makes them stubborn? I mean, it's ultimately like a question of, I think it's like free will. Like, ultimately, like Krishna gives us this free will. We can do what we want. So we can read the books, we can understand the philosophy, we can associate with devotees, we can, again, understand the philosophy more deeply. We can get with Vigyan, like realization through like actual like experience. Like we can go back to material life and see how it's suffering, and like actually like really suffer more because we know now. We've seen the truth of Krishna consciousness. So the stubbornness, again, it's like, we've been in this material world for so long. We have these material desires that, this lust and this idea of enjoying is so deeply rooted within our heart that it takes a lot of sincerity. I mean, complete sincerity. Like you have to be completely sincere to get to the platform of rooting that out. And through sincerity, you'll get the mercy of the spiritual master. You'll get the mercy of Krishna, where, it's not through your own power. It's not that you become like just more powerful than like another devotee or something. Like somehow like you just are better than them, and therefore you don't have material desires. That you're just following strictly, and you just have patience and faith, and you see others that are on that platform, and you see, okay, well, this is a process that's scientific, and I can just follow this, and I have faith in it. And as you continue on, your faith grows more and more. But for those that they don't reach that platform, it's just like, it's a question of like ultimately sincerity and like full surrender. Like they're just not willing to fully surrender. They're not willing to ultimately, Krishna just gives you what you want. I remember Paramahansa Prabhu was saying in the class one time, all these brahmacharis that were really fired up and they didn't want to get married or something, but then ultimately they did. But he was saying he thought ultimately that it was within their heart, that they wanted to, they just weren't expressing it. But and I mean that's one example, but there's just it's ultimately it's between you and Krishna almost, because if you're not revealing your heart to devotees and you're cultivating these things, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to go through that. So it's a question of sincerity, I guess.
The answer is simple, just weakness of heart. That's all.
Yeah.
You're just performing devotional service, but you just have weakness of heart that I'm unable to give up my anarthas.
Yeah.
But you give it up by having good association. Yeah, you get the strength by association. That's all.
You told me one time you're not even fighting it, you're not even trying yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. It's you have to fight back.
If you can't, just be with someone who is doing that.
Yeah.
Prabhu, I have a question about the purport. Prabhupada is saying the impersonalists recommend that one should become desireless, and others recommend banishing desires altogether. And I was thinking about the example for how he's chasing after the prostitute and swimming across the river in the middle of the night, and such an intense story. But even Bilvamangala Thakur comes and is in the home of two saintly persons, and he tells the husband, I want to enjoy with your wife, something like that. And then Bilvamangala Thakur just ends up asking the wife for her hairpins and just pokes his eyes out, I mean, it's an extreme story, but that almost seems like an example of just trying to banish desires altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously we shouldn't compare ourselves to acharyas and exalted devotees who have darshan of Krishna and whatnot, but it almost seems just okay, I'm just gonna shove a pin in my eye and just try to get rid of all my desires,
Yeah.
If you want to comment on that.
Yeah. I mean, that is really intense. Oh my God. It's the intensity. Well, there's also this. I don't know where this is from. That when the idea of sex life comes up in my heart, I spit at the thought. So, who is it? Yamunacharya. This idea of becoming disgusted with that is there. That he felt that desire, and then he became so disgusted with himself that he poked his own eyes out. It's such an extreme thing. Of course, like you said, where we wouldn't do that, but we should develop a aversion to sex life in that way. I mean, I didn't even talk about it in this, but talking about desire. What's the strongest desire? Sex desire is the strongest desire. So, ultimately, that's what's keeping us most bound to this material world, and better to just avoid the association of the opposite sex instead of getting yourself into a situation like that. But it's just even the thought of it, like I was just quoting, even just the thought of it should, we should get to the platform eventually where it's we're so averse to it in that way. But yeah, that's really intense. Thank you.
Actually, it says that Bilvamangal Thakur, was actually on the Raganuga platform, and there's a display of his Raganuga bhakti for Krishna, that he couldn't believe that his eyes dragged him so far away. So what's the use of these eyes? So that was a display of his Raganuga. His love for Krishna was so intense that he couldn't believe that happened. So he's what the heck is the use of this? And he just did it like that. So it's not exactly banishing desire, but it's overwhelming desire of love for Krishna.
How can we distinguish between strong desires, strong spiritual desires and motive passion? Like,
Well-
if I tried to poke my eyes out right now, it's motive passion.
Well, strong spiritual desires are in line with what the acharyas want and what Krishna wants. Like I was saying, that liberate the whole universe. It's a strong spiritual desire. It's a very big desire, but it's like chasing after sex life or these other things that we know are wrong, that the acharyas again say we shouldn't do. That's motive passion. So it's like just simply what Krishna wants. It's like if Krishna likes something, and it's a spiritual desire.
In pursuance of giving up sex attraction, it may act in motive passion. Like if I were to poke my own eyes out, because I'm just sick and tired of sex desire, it's motive passion. It's like a spiritual.
You don't have that platform.
Yeah.
So renunciation and the motive passion is not desired. So that's you have to take guidance from devotees. I mean,
Right.
you don't do things on your own. That's the point here. Bilva Mango Thakur is on the platform of Rag. So therefore he's acting because he knows, he's like, okay, this is. And what did he do right after that? He didn't lament my eyes. He went to Vrindavan, sat down and worshipped Krishna. So that's the platform he's on. Whereas if we did that, we're going to sit here and whine about and cry about how we poked our eyes out and I shouldn't have done that and I was misled and all of these things. Huge hospital bills. You won't be just satisfied going to Vrindavan and sitting there. If you can do that, then okay. If you can go to Vrindavan, sit there, chant, 192 rounds, 200 rounds every day, then sure, okay, go ahead, poke your eyes out and go and do that. But you're not going to be able to do that. So you have to take guidance from devotees, as Ambarish Maharaj is giving us. Use your eyes to see the Lord. You have lust, look at Krishna's eyebrows. You don't have to poke your eyes out. That's a pastimes that's there to show us the intensity of love for Krishna that Bilva Mangal Thakur has. But, there's so many things that Acharyas have given us. We're not just, we don't have to just do that. We can just let our eyes be absorbed in just seeing Krishna. This was one of the things that helped me the most when I was first coming around. I would make it a point in my life to go to see the deity every day and just kind of sit there and just chant my rounds. Just like each deity, just chant a whole round going from the feet to the face of the Lord. And there's 6 deities, so, you're chanting each round, so 7. Sure. So, 12. But main deities, there's 6. Or chant 2 rounds per deity if you have a lot of rounds left. And you can really get absorbed in seeing that and praying to the Lord. And I remember specifically that really helping just my spiritual life, just being able to go in front of the Lord after coming from Sankirtan or being at university or whatever it was, just making a point every day, okay, I'm going to come and see the Lord and just kind of, get darshan. So there's so many other ways of diverting that desire and that difficulty one may have. It's not just one, it doesn't have to be the extreme thing because we're not on that level. You'll see how acharyas do some extreme things, but you can see their level of devotion that is present.
Mataris? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpa Dribhya Chakrapisandribhya Shabbatitana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.